Greetings and welcome back to Haftarot, the weekly video cast in which we take a look at the upcoming week's Haftara, understand its basic message and how it's related to the Kriyat HaTorah which precedes it on Shabbat morning. My name is Yitzchak Etshalom. I'm delighted to be studying the Haftara of Parashat Shelah, which is this week's Haftara in all of the Edot, in all of the communities. Ashkenaz, Farad, Chalabi, all of them read this Haftara, which is from the book of Yehoshua. So let's remember that the main theme, the main story of Parashat Shlach is Hashem commanding Moshe, and it's very unclear where that command came from. Was it Moshe's request, as we see in Dvarim, or it came from Hashem, to send scouts to the land, one member from each tribe that's going to inherit land, to come to the land and scout out the land. They're not spies in any sense of the word. They're not acting as spies. When you want spies, you don't send 12, you send a few, you don't send people with big names. Their job is not to bring back food, but these fellows, their job is to go to the land and to bring back fruit from the land and to scout out the entire land. And it seems like they're sort of setting up a territorial division in advance. The mission, as we know, is an abject failure because they come back, and in spite of the fact they report that the land is great, they also report that the people there are scary and we'll never be able to beat them. And one thing leads to another till everybody weeps, and there is a rebellion and desire to go back to Egypt, to essentially rip up all of Jewish history of Yetziat Mitzrayim and Matan Torah and all of that and go back and be slaves in Egypt. It stopped. However, the terrible decree is given that this generation of adults will die out in the desert, and their children will be the one to come and inherit the land. And that means that there's a whole extra generation, 38 and a half more years, that they're going to be in the desert until the new generation is ready to come in. And we actually read about that new generation coming into the land the other time that we had a Haftara from the book of Yehoshua. Because on the first day of Chag HaMatzot, we read about Yehoshua's Korban Pesach, that he oversaw, first prepared the people with the mass Brit Milah that happened because during all of those 38 and a half years, nobody was getting Brit Milah. So they were all Arelim. And then they did the Korban Pesach as soon as they entered the land. We're going to go a little bit further back in Sefer Yehoshua. This is the other Haftara of Sefer Yehoshua. And take a look at a story while Yehoshua and the camp is still on the East Bank. Moshe has just passed away. The people are still involved in mourning for Moshe, whether it was during the 30 days or just after the 30 days of mourning for Moshe. Sometime evidently towards the beginning of the month of Nisan of that year, almost 40 years to the date since we left Mitzrayim, Yehoshua sends scouts, except he sends real spies. 2 spies, we don't know their names. They go to the city of Yericho, one city, the first city that we're going to come to on entering the land, to find out its vulnerability, to find out the state of the people, their readiness, their awareness of Am Yisrael, and then to come back and report. And as we read in the Haftara, their mission is an absolute success. They come to Yericho, they find out that the people in Yericho are very scared of them. They've heard about all of the power of Hashem, going all the way back nearly 40 years to Kriyat Yamsuf, and as recently as the past season in which they defeated the mighty kings Sichon and Og, and everybody is scared of them, and they know that they have a great psychological advantage. They are helped in this by a woman named Rachav, who on the spot seems to convert and accept monotheism. She declares her allegiance and belief in the one God of heaven and earth who controls everything, and she makes an arrangement with them that when they come into the land, she and her family will be spared. And they work out a signal of how to know what her house is, which her house is. And as we read later in Sefer Yehoshua, that's exactly what happens. But I want to tell you one other thing about Yehoshua, which is really marvelous. When Yehoshua leads his wars, and this is something that we did not touch on the last time we met Yehoshua, when Yehoshua leads his wars of conquest of Eretz Canaan, which are, from the perspective of Sefer Yehoshua, a landslide, a steamroll over the kings of Canaan, the 31 kings of Canaan. And the first major battle that he has against a coalition of kings. Remember, Canaan was made up of small city-states, Yericho, Ha'ai, these are all city-states. But when there was a coalition of kings against whom he fought, that he surprised them with an early morning incursion and attack against these 5 kings. And as the kings were fleeing, Yoshua, for purposes of the battle, needed the heavenly bodies to not move, whether it's because he wanted the day to remain long so that he would have more time to fight, or because he wanted the sun to be still on the horizon so it would be in their eyes as they ran away. One way or the other, that was what he needed. And in Perek Yod, Psukim Yod Bet Yodal, there's a very powerful, well-known passage in which Yoshua stands up and says, Shemesh b'Givon dom v'yareach be'emek hayalon. He orders the sun to stand still in Givon, which is where he is, and the moon to stay still in the valley of Ayalon, which is a few miles to the west of that. And it sounds like he's saying this at a time that the sun and the moon are both in the sky, which would mean around a horizon event. And the text says, Vayidom HaShemesh v'yareach hamad. Indeed, the sun and the moon stood still ad yikom ogoyevav, until the nation was able to exact revenge from their enemies. In other words, the sun and the moon stopping was effective in allowing them to finish the war the way that they needed it to happen. And the final pasuk here is, there was never a day like that since or before or since that Hashem attended or obeyed the voice of a man, because God was fighting on behalf of the Jewish people. Very powerful sentiment, very powerful statement of the esteem in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Bnei Yisrael all held Yehoshua, who of course was their military leader and perhaps more importantly was the successor to Moshe. And the Haftara we read is the entire chapter 2 of Yehoshua, which tells us the story of those spies, their arrival in Yericho, their interactions with Rachav, allowing them to sneak out of the city through the window of her house. They stay in the mountains for 3 days west of Yericho, and then after the posse that went out looking for them has given up on them, they sneak back, come back to the camp, and tell Yehoshua that indeed, just as we sang 40 years ago at Yam Suf, Namogu kol yoshvei aretz panenu, all of the people who live in the land are scared of us. Their hearts have melted because they're afraid of us. We are on our way to victory, and indeed, that's what happened. Everybody should have a wonderful Shabbat and enjoy the story of Yehoshua, which in a sense is repairing the story of the quote-unquote Meraglim, which is the main focus of this week's parasha. Shabbat Shalom.